An infamous motorcycle gang believed they had discovered an easy target when they chose to attack a little roadside coffee store. Unbeknownst to them, the demure woman behind the counter was engaged in more than just providing coffee. Truth was being served by her. Although federal judge Jessica Evans had devoted her life to making a difference from her vantage point on the bench, she was about to change the lives of an entire town while seated behind an espresso machine. Amazingly, this is based on a true story of how the courage of a single woman transformed a group of violent criminals into heroes who defended the neighborhood they had oppressed. Please tell us in the comments where you are listening to us before we begin today's story. Also, subscribe if you like reading this kind of content. Tomorrow, we have another incredible story in store for you. As Jessica Evans tied her apron with practiced accuracy, the early sun cast long shadows across the well-worn counter of early light coffee. She discovered solace in the weekly practice of assisting at her sister Elena's coffee stand, exchanging her judge's robes for this plain black apron. Jessica was simply Jessica to the regulars. She was the helpful cashier who kept track of their orders and was quick with a grin. Still the same Tom. With a familiar grin spreading across his aged face, the retired police officer approached the counter, prompting Jessica to question. "Dear Jessica, you are well aware of this. This coffee is still unrivaled across 3 counties." Tom perched on the counter, a mischievous glint in his eye. "How is Elena adjusting to her new home?" "Performing quite well. Her business acumen is commendable." To make Tom's drink, double espresso with a dollop of cream, Maris got to work. "However, I believe she hid this area from me so I could retain my sanity. Taking a morning break from the courthouse once a week is really helpful." The faraway sound of motorbikes broke the tranquil morning ritual. As the volume increased, Tom's demeanor changed as his instincts as a former police officer kicked in. The morning sun reflected off the chrome of 6 motorcycles as they pulled into the parking lot. With their stellar reputation already in hand, the Shadow Riders MC had finally arrived. With a leather cut that proudly displayed the club's colors, Jake Viper Thompson dismounted first. Marcus Tank Davidson trailed behind, his towering stature illuminating the sidewalk with his shadow. Everyone others on board bowed to the leader. The jittery energy of 2 prospects was noticeable, along with Danny, Razor, Martinez, Mike, Ghost, and Wilson. "Well, well," Jake exclaimed, his voice carrying over the crowd. "It appears like we have located a suitable place." Observing other clients quiver nervously, his grin deepened. Now is the perfect moment to meet the locals. The young barista Sarah, who was helping Jessica, became obviously nervous as the motorcyclists drew near. "Perhaps we ought to contact someone," she said to Jessica. On Sarah's shoulder, Jessica delicately rested a hand. "Relax and let me to take care of this. It will be fine." Disregarding the cries of customers patiently waiting in line, the motorcyclists forcefully advanced to the front. Jake perched on the counter, his mischievous grin fixed on his face. "Good morning, my love. This is a very nice little setup." "Good morning," Jessica responded with a level head. "In case you want to place an order, there's a queue. When it's your turn, I'll be more than delighted to assist you." Jake's grin wavered just a little, but then it was back, sharper than before. "Perhaps what I said was misunderstood. Look, Shadow Rider has claimed this area. Plus, we get to decide what laws apply on our land." In the cramped room, Tank's enormous stature was a frightening sight as he advanced. "Do you have an issue with the fact that our boss suggested we're next?" Tom was about to finish his coffee when Jessica caught his gaze and offered a gentle head movement. Escalation wasn't going to work, she realized it. "No, not just yet." Jessica stated with a level head that she did, in fact, have an issue with that. The Shadow Riders included, this is a business after all, and the rules are the rules. After being amused, Jake became irritated. "You obviously have no idea who we are or how this works, woman. My friend, allow me to explain it in clear English. Things will get tricky unless you play by our rules. Mr. Thompson, is that a danger? Jake hesitated as a new gravitas crept into Jessica's voice. You are familiar with my name. His expression was doubtful for an instant. You and the Shadow Riders are well known to me. It is my understanding that next week you are expected to make an appearance in my courtroom. Jessica Evans, a federal judge. However, I considerably enjoy serving coffee rather than sentences. As Jake realized what this meant, his expression became increasingly pale. Uncomfortably, the other motorcyclists shifted, their former bluster vanishing. With his once imposing presence now uncertain, Tank retreated a step. Razor, a judge, grimaced. Jake raised a hand to mute Boss, who had suggested that perhaps we should. It was a forced smirk that returned to his face. Whoa, that's quite cool. A judge enjoying a cup of coffee while slumming it. I wonder how the newspapers would cover that. Jessica kept her tone neutral, predicting that they would be more interested in your impending racketeering case. Would you wish to place an order, or are you through trying to scare my sister's business? A palpable sense of unease pervaded the atmosphere. Fear and fascination mingled as customers witnessed the transaction. Tom was prepared to step in, but Jessica clearly didn't need him to do anything because she was keeping her cool. With his jaw clenched in shock, Jake eyed Jessica for what seemed like an eternity. At last he did something about his leather cut and straightened up. Guess what? Coffee isn't going down my hatch today. Okay, guys, I think we should go for a ride. Jake wasn't through yet, so the motorcycles started to retreat, their departure less spectacular than their arrival. With a menacing tone in his words, he redirected his attention to the door. Your Honor, this is far from over. Jessica agreed with Mr. Thompson. What happens next is totally up to you, it's only just started. As they roared out of the parking lot, the Shadow Riders created a sense of unease and chaos. Sarah released a nervous breath that she had been suppressing. Jessica, what's our plan? Jessica calmly and methodically started wiping down the counter. Sarah, we will be serving coffee. We will administer justice next week when Mr. Thompson and his associates appear in my courtroom. The art of non-intimidation is a powerful lesson that certain people need to hear. It's about being a strong advocate for justice. Tom smiled knowingly as he turned back to Jessica after seeing the bikers fade away down the highway. You can count on their return. I have my hopes set on it. Jessica said that the courtroom is the proper place for some people to learn their lessons. Some people should figure them out over coffee. In any case, I will be prepared. Customers sluggishly resumed their rituals as the morning sun continued its ascent, spreading shorter shadows across the counter. There was a shift, though, like a cup of coffee in the morning. An ordinary coffee stand became the unexpected arena for a confrontation between fairness and coercion once a boundary was established and a position was adopted. Even though the Shadow Riders would come back, they would realize they had messed with the wrong woman, one who served justice and coffee equally. Jessica was already at the coffee stand the following morning, meticulously inspecting the equipment, when Elena came early. Elena placed down her purse and told you that you weren't obligated to come in today. On this Wednesday, things are different. Everything I needed to be done yesterday has been completed. With deft motions, Jessica checked the espresso machine. Plus, our newfound companions might be back for more. A look of concern crossed Elena's face. The Shadow Horsemen were mentioned to me. My phone rang last night from Tom. Maybe it would be best if we closed for a few days till everything calms down. That's precisely what they want, Jessica said with conviction in her voice. Elena, they trade in fear. This is no place for them to trade in it. The morning throng started to trickle in, but it was much smaller than normal. On the day of her shift, Sarah showed up, her normally upbeat disposition muted. She confessed, I nearly called in sick, as she tied her apron. On the other hand, Jessica, I reflected on how you defied them. I aspire to possess such courage. Jessica reassured her that being brave isn't about being fearless. It's about facing your fears and doing the right thing. Prior to the return of the low-volume sound of motorbikes, the morning passed in relative silence. Jake and Tank were the only ones entering the parking lot at a leisurely pace this time. The rest of the gang wasn't there. Those few clients that were there hastily collected their belongings and departed. Jake confidently approached the counter, his grin fixed on his face. "Good morning, August Court. Had a chance to reflect on yesterday's chat?" Jessica calmly acknowledged Mr. Thompson. "Can I take your order for today? Is the pretense that this is about territory still alive and well?" With his towering stature, Tank advanced. "Miss, be mindful of your tone. No matter how you slice it, you're still on our patch." Elena surprised everyone by speaking up. "It is my domain. I get to choose who gets to stay on this property since I own it." Jake grinned even more. Ownership is an interesting concept. Mishaps do occur, and ownership of certain properties might change hands. It would be unfortunate if this charming little arrangement were to be disrupted. "Is my sister in danger because of you, Mr. Thompson?" There was a steely quality to Jessica's voice. "It would be a most regrettable choice, particularly considering your present legal predicament." Jake responded with grace and non-threateningness. "We are merely engaging in a cordial business conversation." "Hey, Tank." Tank made a significant crack with his knuckles. "Very cordial." "Allow me to clarify," Jessica replied, coming around the corner of the counter to confront Jake squarely. "I will be hearing your case next week. Your every intimidation attempt and threat just serves to bolster the prosecution's case. The criminal group targets lawful companies." Skirk of Jake's mouth drooped. "Our legal team will reject this as evidence." "Yes, I can. There is an obvious pattern of criminal activity in your activities here." The security cameras that Elena had set up were actually caught Jessica's eye. "There is a record of everything you do. So, go ahead and keep threatening things. The only thing you're doing is making things worse for yourself." Jake looked uncertain for an instant. He was unprepared for the presence of cameras. With a little less menacing presence, Tank moved uncomfortably. "You believe you're really intelligent," Jake hissed. "However, you have no idea what you're up against. The riders of the shadow show no mercy. Intended for no one. So maybe it's about time you figured it out," Jessica said. "Because coffee is simply one of many topics at this point. Justice, community, and resisting bullies who believe they can take advantage of anyone are at the heart of this." As Jake approached, he whispered something ominous. "Do you truly intend to turn our friends against us? If we want to, we can really complicate things for the two of you. If you want to spend the next 10 years behind bars, I can arrange for that to happen." Then Jessica spoke out. "Mr. Thompson, the decision is yours. Do the right thing and go now, otherwise, you will pay the price." Their relationship was tense and strained. Jake appeared on the verge of acting hastily for a brief instant. Nevertheless, Tank reached out and touched his shoulder. "Boss, it would be wise for us to consider this carefully. Aside from that court date, she has cameras." Jake retreated a step after shrugging off Tank's grasp. He growled as if this was far from over. Jessica boldly stated that, "Indeed, it is. It hasn't even occurred to you yet." The sound of their motors beckoned the motorcyclists back to their bikes, and they rode away. Elena gasped for air as they vanished down the highway. "Why are you up to no good, Jessica? These guys are a threat. Giving kids the idea that they can dominate others by instilling fear is equally dangerous," Jessica retorted. "The courtroom is not always the proper venue for the administration of justice." With wide eyes, Sarah saw the exchange. What if, however, they return with the entire gang? Jessica turned around and went back to the counter, saying that they probably will. True strength isn't based on intimidating others, they'll discover that when they do. Ultimately, it comes down to doing the right thing, no matter the consequences. We waited anxiously for the shadow riders to return, but they never came. Regulars began to trickle back in as news circulated that Judge Evans had stayed firm against the infamous motorcyclists. Tom purposefully remained for an extended while, his instincts as a veteran police officer on high alert. He whispered to Jessica, "You're playing a dangerous game," when the morning rush subsided. "I'm familiar with dealing with shadow riders. When confronted, they become defensive. According to Jessica, who was sweeping the counter, neither do I. Someone has to prove to them that this community is too strong to be intimidated by their tactics. Think you're the best person to take charge?" Jessica stopped and stared out toward the highway, where the motorcyclists had vanished. "A human touch is necessary for justice at times, in my opinion. They thought they'd find an easy mark here. Someone who is well versed in the distinction between law and justice was instead located." The coffee stand was bathed in shorter shadows as the morning sun rose higher in the sky. The confrontation was still very much ongoing, Jessica knew. The shadow riders would likely come again in a larger contingent, determined to assert their authority. The line she had drawn in the sand, though, would not be retracted. She had come to rely on this peaceful coffee shop as an escape from the stresses of being a judge. In the greater struggle against coercion and terror, it had transformed into a battleground. Whatever happened after that, Jessica Evans was prepared for. Sarah, Jessica, and Elena lingered late into the night planning their next move over a cup of weak coffee in the morning. They were all nervous and resolute after the clash of the day. The sound of several motorbikes pierced the twilight stillness just as Jessica was about to outline a security plan. Peering through the window, Sarah whispered, her hands quivering, about their back. "They're more numerous now." As they entered the parking area, the shadow riders formed a frightening semicircle around the coffee stand with their bikes. Tank, Razor, Ghost, and Jake were at the lead of the pack, which also included at least 8 more individuals. The dying light reflected off their leather scars. A warning symbol, the gang's emblem. "Go to the back, Elena and Sarah," Jessica stated in a calm voice as she untied her apron. "Contact Tom instead of the authorities." "No, not just yet. You can't face them alone," Jessica was told by Elena in her protest. As Jessica spoke, she kept her gaze locked on the oncoming motorcyclists. "The law supports my position." As before, Jake swaggered more than before as he pushed through the door first. Following closely behind, the remaining members of the gang crowded into the cramped area, creating a threatening atmosphere. Anxiety thickened the atmosphere. "Good evening, sir," Jake said with a scowl. "I propose that we host a coffee gathering with some friends. I hope that isn't an issue." Behind the counter, Jessica maintained a calm yet vigilant stance. "I don't think you came here for coffee anyway, Mr. Thompson, even though the stands were closed." Tank turned to face Jake, his enormous stature creating dramatic silhouettes in the waning light. "Perhaps our intention was merely to engage in a cordial discussion regarding boundaries and deference. It takes work to win respect," Jessica said with a level spirit. "Something that your company appears to have overlooked." Danger lurked in Jake's grin. "I bet you believe you're really intelligent." Observing the scene with an air of superiority. "You are not in your courtroom out here. Here, the regulations are different. All areas are subject to the law, Mr. Thompson. This very place. The legislation." Jake let out a hard, sarcastic laugh. "Assess your surroundings. Is there a rule of law here? You are the only one here, attempting to play the hero." Suddenly, Razor and Ghost started to stomp about the room, purposefully destroying furniture and exhibits. Everyone understood. They were demonstrating dominance and authority. Peering over the edge of the counter, Jake persisted. "Small businesses are not immune to accidents. Fires, break-ins, vandalism. How disheartening when that occurs." Jessica kept her voice calm. In front of a federal judge, are you seriously threatening to commit arson and vandalism? While being captured on tape? Not even the shadow riders would dare do that. A shadow fell over Jake's face. Those cameras are terrifying, aren't you? Seriously? You really believe that we're scared of anything? When asked if she thought you were scared, Jessica said yes. You wouldn't need to round up your whole gang if it weren't necessary to intimidate a coffee stall. True power doesn't necessitate a spectator, Mr. Thompson. Those were poignant words. Anger was beginning to creep through Jake's slightly damaged facade. True strength is something you are completely ignorant about. See what happens to those who disrespect our land when I show you. Tank, in response to his nod, advanced while cracking his knuckles. As he was about to proceed, though, the door rang. Tom Cooper, David Chen, and a slew of other regulars made their way inside. Their message was loud and obvious, so they stood close to Jessica. She had company. Tom nonchalantly remarked, "Good evening, Jake," as the room was filled with his old-school police vibe. Up to no good again. In order to better understand the situation, Jake squinted his eyes. The situation had changed, but he couldn't afford to embarrass himself in front of his colleagues by giving up now. "This isn't my concern, sir," Jake scowled. "It is, in fact." David Chen raised his hand. "Is this a coffee table? We take care of our own since it's a part of our community." The riders of the Tempest moved clumsily. They hadn't anticipated the evening to unfold like this. With great interest, Jessica noted the shift in their behavior. The reason being, she whispered to Mr. Thompson. "That is the distinction between being intimidating and actually being strong. People unite in the face of true strength. The use of intimidation reveals your true vulnerability." Jake clenched his fists as he pondered his alternatives. At last, he straightened himself and refined his haircut. Even to him, the threat seemed empty, but he insisted it wasn't over. To Jake's amazement, Jessica explained, "I'm going to recuse myself from your case come Monday morning." Jake's head sprang up in response. "Excuse me? After what we've been through, I can't be objective now. Judge Harrison will hear your case." Jessica's delicate grin was telling. "And I'll tell you what, she's far less forgiving than I am." A flush of redness spread over Jake's cheeks. The severe sentences handed down by Judge Harrison were well known, particularly in cases involving organized crime. You made it happen. It was just too late for him to realize it. No, you were completely independent on that, Mr. Thompson. Each and every intimidation attempt. Your organization's nature has been clearly demonstrated. Now you're going to have to deal with the fallout. As Jake surveyed the room, he watched his power play deteriorate. With their self-assurance now shaken, his gang was already retreating towards the door. Encouraging us to go for a ride, he barking while attempting to keep his composure. However, the reality was obvious to all. It was already too late for the Shadow Riders to win this fight. Before the riders dispersed, Jessica's voice trailed behind. "Monday remains your court date, Mr. Thompson. You need to bring a more positive attitude than what you've shown here." Motorbikes screeched to a halt as the gang bolted away, leaving behind the same cacophony that had preceded them. However, rather than intimidating, it sounded desperate this time. Tom grinned as he turned to Jessica. "That was quite astute, Judge Harrison. A bit of forethought is required while pursuing justice." While restoring the exhibits that had fallen over, Jessica spoke up. They were hoping to discover some vulnerability. Rather, they encountered a community that was prepared to support one another. With expressions of relief on their cheeks, Elena and Sarah came out of hiding. "Will they actually refrain from coming? What do you think?" Sarah queried. The spot where the motorcycles had vanished into the night was visible to Jessica. "They will return," she whispered softly. "However, the next time around, they won't be up against only us." The strength of a united community will be their enemy. Nothing, not even threats, can change it. On Monday morning, the air in the courtroom was thick with anxiety. Before submitting her recusal, Jessica sat in her chambers and reviewed the Shadow Riders case file one last time. Racketeering, extortion, and intimidation of local businesses were already considerable pieces of evidence, and their behavior at Morning Light Coffee had just added another layer to their criminal routine. As she was lost in thinking, she heard a knock on her door. Already anticipating the arrival, she summoned them inside. With a worried look on his face, District Attorney James Phillips stepped inside. "It is time to discuss the Shadow Rider case, Judge Evans. Are you withdrawing from the situation?" "Sure, James. Their choice to attack my sister's coffee stand was a mistake. Now is not the time for me to preserve objectivity." As he sat down, the district attorney ran his fingers through his beard. "You are absolutely necessary for this case. You've witnessed their abilities up close and personal. That is why I am unable to serve as its presider," Jessica stated with conviction. "Rest assured, Judge Harrison will deal with it in a proper manner." Philip barely mustered a smile. "Harrison, where are you?" "Oh, how smart. Clarity is necessary for justice at times." Elena sent a text message to Jessica's phone, interrupting their conversation. "Here they are. To a person." Jessica clenched her jaw. "Jai, pardon me. Something needs my attention." Standing up, he inquired about the Shadow Riders. "Do you want me to ring the backup?" "No, not just yet. First, we should observe how they deal with real-world repercussions." Despite her composed demeanor, Jessica's heart was beating as she drove to the coffee kiosk. They were all there, the Shadow Riders MC, when she pulled into the lot. In a neat row, their motorcycles resembled a steel and chrome wall. Jake leaned against the counter, hugging Elena, as Tank and the others dispersed about the room. Observing her surroundings, Jessica entered stealthily. With a pale but resolute expression, Elena confronted Jake. Jake was delivering a final warning. "Return the deed to the owner before things get out of hand. Your effort at intimidation is the only thing that is unpleasant about this." There was a break in the tension as Jessica spoke. "Especially first thing in the morning before your court time." Anger contorted Jake's face as he turned around. "This is entirely on you." "Absolutely not, Mr. Thompson. You have brought this upon yourselves. Would you desire to continue with the charges of witness intimidation, or would you prefer to depart while you are still able to?" With his patience obviously wearing thin, Tank advanced. "Judge, we've had enough of your games. It concludes today." "Absolutely, wholeheartedly." Jessica took out her phone and responded. "That is why I have just sent a text message to Phillips, the district attorney. What your organization has been up to recently has piqued his curiosity." As Jessica's remarks resonated, the energy changed. The ever-cautious Razor finally spoke out. "We ought to leave, boss. Do not do this. Quiet down." Jake lost it, yet there was a hint of terror in his voice. "We will not budge, not at this moment. So, allow me to clarify." As Jessica moved closer, she spoke. "Your case file will be updated with every threat you make or moment you spend here. Companies that don't apologize or try to improve are of special interest to Judge Harrison." It was the desired impact of bringing Harrison's name up. Tank himself recoiled as a number of gang members shuffled uncomfortable. "Use the law as a weapon, you think you're so clever," Jake growled. "Mr. Thompson, the law is not a weapon. It's like a shield, keeping the powerful at arm's length from the helpless. You are currently demonstrating the absolute necessity of that shield." Instead of being afraid, Elena was determined, and she stood at her sister's side. "For 3 generations, our family has been involved in this area's commercial community. We have no plans to leave." As Jake peered about, He could feel his grip on the situation start to loosen. I could hear sirens coming from a ways away. Jessica softly explained that those would be the deputy positions. Considering your impending court appearance, I have no doubt that they would be quite intrigued by this get-together. My boss. It was the first time Ghost raised their voice. We must depart. Right now. Fury and frustration twisted Jake's face. His finger trembling, he gestured towards Jessica. Nothing has ended yet. Not even close. Actually, it's because you're given an option now, Mr. Thompson. You can either stay and add to your charges or go now and face them like a man. Choice of you. The beeps became more piercing. As soon as Jake recognized the predicament he had put himself in, his determination began to erode. Shadow Riders, he growled. It's over. The members of the gang were unable to depart quickly enough. Urgent self-preservation supplanted their previous swagger. As the first police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, the sound of rushing motorbikes echoed through the air. Sarah Martinez, a deputy, came out to survey the situation. Are you satisfied with this, Judge Evans? Jessica confirmed the answer, Deputy. The Shadow Riders were present to try to intimidate witnesses before to their court appearance, but other than that, it's just a few possible defendants making bad choices. Uncomfortably, the deputy grinned. That is something that Judge Harrison will definitely find intriguing. Tightly, Elena embraced her sister. In a hushed voice, she expressed her fear. In any case, I anticipated your arrival. For as long as you need me, Jessica said. It's just the way families are. That is the essence of community. The Shadow Riders had vanished from sight as Jessica watched the highway from her window as the deputies took statements and collected evidence. This wasn't really over, she knew. Jake Thompson and other men weren't easily defeated. However, today something had changed. A new power dynamic had emerged, and the Shadow Riders could now feel the crushing pressure of genuine justice. You do realize that they will look at other options, right? Elena spoke out as she could read her sister's mind. Let them try, Jessica said. They're finding out the hard way that being intimidating doesn't make you strong. Ultimately, it comes down to doing the right thing, no matter the consequences. The coffee kiosk, which had turned into an unexpected arena for justice, was illuminated by the rising morning sun. A lesson on power was what the Shadow Riders had hoped to impart. On the contrary, they were gaining knowledge about the importance of community, standing united against intimidation and justice. As Jake Thompson and the Shadow Riders made their way inside Judge Harrison's courtroom, the air was thick with anxiety in the courthouse. In contrast to their leather cuts, Jessica saw from her vantage point in the gallery how different they looked in the court-mandated suits. Tank, with his towering stature, appeared smaller without his gang colors. A severe-looking woman in her 60s, Judge Harrison, examined the accused through her reading glasses. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, but I thought you said something about an incident involving the intimidation of witnesses earlier today. Jake's attorney, a frightened man in a baggy suit, rose abruptly. My client denies any wrongdoing, Your Honor. Keep it. Harrison interrupted him. I've watched the surveillance video. Indeed, I have watched a considerable amount of video in the previous several days. Could you perhaps shed some light on your client's justification for threatening a federal judge and the family business? Jake moved about in his chair in an uncomfortable way. His cockiness, which he had displayed at the coffee stand, had vanished. He was followed by a group of Shadow Riders who looked at each other anxiously. Phillips, the district attorney, rose without a hitch. These additional developments have led the state to ask that the charges be amended to encompass criminal harassment, attempted extortion, and witness intimidation, Your Honor. Refutation, Jake's legal counsel mumbled. The latest accusations have not been adequately dismissed. Anger erupted in Harrison. Please, rise up, Mr. Thompson. Jake carefully stood up, his expression betraying his barely repressed anger. "Your charity has been on my radar for quite some time," Harrison persisted. "You have gone from preying on little companies to threatening a federal judge and her family, all as part of your protection racket. Justify the immediate revocation of your bail by providing a single justification." The doors to the courtroom swung open before Jake could answer. A pale-faced Elena hurried in. Ignoring courthouse protocol, she called out to Jessica. They destroyed the entire stand. Those in the gallery who were rooting for the Shadow Riders started muttering and smirking, but their joy was fleeting. The gavel of Judge Harrison shook as loudly as Viper. "Arrest Mr. Thompson and his accomplices immediately, bailiff." The attorney for Jake raised a protest before you, Your Honor. "Can you honestly say that my clients were involved in anything? Harrison's voice has the power to put out flames. Just an hour ago, Mr. Thompson ordered the hit, and now I'm staring at a text message from his phone. Have you forgotten that we were eavesdropping on your conversations?" A flush of redness spread over Jake's cheeks. Tank muttered an expletive behind him as Razor shut his eyes in a state of defeat. Jessica rose to her feet, her voice resonating across the courtroom. "Excuse me, Your Honor, but I have a suggestion." She was given permission to approach the bench by Harrison's nod. "The Shadow Riders have revealed their identities," Jessica started. "However, maybe this is a chance to reveal their true potential. Perhaps we might give transformation instead of merely punishment. Tell me just what you're proposing, Judge Evans." "Community service. Long hours spent volunteering. Get them to fix up the coffee stand and the rest of the neighborhood after they wrecked it. They should see the neighborhood they've been terrorizing for themselves." Regret had replaced wrath in Jake's expression as he yanked up his head. Harrison tapped her pen thoughtfully as she evaluated the suggestion. "Mr. Thompson," Harrison spoke to him in a clear voice. "A decision is available to you. First, I could add the new charges, revoke your bail, and put you in danger of a 20-year prison sentence. The second choice is to enroll your entire group in a rigorous, supervised community service program. Demonstrating that you are more than simply biker thugs, you will restore what you have destroyed while also mentoring at-risk youngsters." The jury was on the edge of its seat. As Jake turned around to face his gang members again, he could see the expressions of terror and doubt on their faces. He now appeared to grasp the full extent of the damage his leadership had inflicted. "And if we go with the community service," he inquired, his voice betraying his customary lack of vanity, "then you'll be given the opportunity to redo your narrative. In order to turn your group into a protector of the neighborhood rather than a terrorizer," Jessica responded before Harrison could. As Harrison emphasized, "The choice is yours, but you must make a swift decision. Judge Evans has infinite patience, I, on the other hand, have limits." Turning to his crew, Jake spoke. Razor and Tank both nodded slowly. The Shadow Riders voiced their approval of the deal one by one. Jake finally decided to go with option 2. Choosing to do community service was a smart move. In response, Harrison warned that if the accused made even a small slip-up or reverted to their former habits, they would be held fully accountable. "Is that clear to you?" "Indeed, I am honored." While the parties were negotiating the terms of the agreement, Jessica discreetly left the courtroom to be with Elena. Back to morning coffee, they went together. Windows were shattered, machinery was wrecked, and walls were covered in graffiti. The damage was substantial. Softly, Jessica replied, "I'm really sorry, Elena," but by that point, Elena had already rolled up her sleeves. "Stay calm. Look, people from the neighborhood started showing up with cleaning materials, equipment, and offers to pitch in. A cleanup crew was being organized by Tom Cooper, and contractors were being called by David Chen. Elena stated that our resilience was strengthened despite their efforts to weaken us." As additional neighbors showed up to lend a hand, Jessica observed. "Every once in a while, it's the worst of individuals that makes other people shine. So you believe they'll actually evolve? The Shadow Riders?" Elena inquired as she retrieved a broom. While the rest of the town rallied to rebuild, Jessica beheld the devastation all around. The power of a united society is something they will have to see for themselves. They are about to learn the hard way what it means to be strong. A strange scene unfolded during the early hours of the following morning's coffee break. As Jessica described their repair efforts, Jake Thompson and 5 other shadow riders awkwardly stood in their court-mandated community service vests. As she gestured toward the shattered glass, she gave the following order of importance: replace the windows, then the counter, the appliances, and lastly the outside. We must improve upon everything that has come before. Jake shrank awkwardly, averting his gaze. What a shame, he whispered to himself. According to Jessica, it's even more embarrassing than ruining a tiny business just to show off your power. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, but this is all about finding forgiveness. To everyone's surprise, Tank was the one who volunteered first. Please just instruct us. We will finish faster if we begin immediately. Local news vans pulled into the parking area as the bikers began removing debris. The news had reported on a federal judge's efforts to use community service to change an infamous biker gang. Jake scowled at the reporters and told them not to use their cameras. As Jessica pointed out, the cameras remain. The community should be made aware of this. Your sincerity in seeking forgiveness must be evident to them. Razor stopped sweeping as he was working close by. Yes, she is correct, sir. In public, we made this disaster. We might as well fix it in front of everyone. An odd pattern emerged as the morning wore on. Working in vibrant orange vests and without their leather cuts, the shadow riders eventually settled into a regular routine. At first hesitant, local contractors eventually warmed up to the idea of teaching them the ropes. Even the bikers were welcomed by Elena, who had brought coffee for them. Upon receiving it, Jake gazed in astonishment at his cup. Why? Quietly, he inquired. Even those who didn't believe we deserved a first opportunity should give us another shot, Elena said. Something out of the ordinary started to transpire as the day progressed. The bikers began to perceive things from a new angle after being compelled to collaborate with the exact people they had frightened. The stories of the businesses they had threatened, the people they had frightened, and the lives they had affected were relayed to them. It was accompanied by his mother that a little boy, perhaps 12 years old, made his way to the construction site. With wide eyes, he peered at a tank. I thought you were going to fix the coffee stand. This is what the youngster wanted to know. Tank wiped perspiration from his forehead and stopped working. Well, we're repairing what we damaged, you know. To be honest, I blamed you. The word struck Tank with more force than any blow. He cast a quick check over the other shadow riders and noticed that they were just as uneasy as he was. According to Tank, we were, but it seems like we're attempting to change our image now. Jessica, who was watching the exchange, noticed a change in the motorcyclists' attitude. Though understated, it was noticeable. Their first cracked surface. Jake eventually went up to Jessica during their lunch break. He whispered, "This isn't what I expected. How could you have possibly anticipated this? Justice served. Public shaming. Not. The members of the community who were helping them out were pointed out by him. Sure thing. Mr. President, this is the essence of community, not a map to conquer but a network of interconnected individuals. People who, if given the chance, will lend you a hand." In the afternoon, other surprises arrived. David Chen, whose eatery the Shadow Riders had previously sought out, showed up with enough food to feed everyone. David persisted, and the motorcyclists eventually agreed. He informed them that they were doing a wonderful job. It is deserving of praise. As he chewed his food, Razor appeared distressed. Attempts were made to dissuade him last year. Jake, he muttered. We are being fed by him now. Out of the blue, Jessica chimed in to say that this is exactly what your company has been lacking. You have never known what it's like to truly belong to a community because you have been so intent on taking from it. Even as the day came to a close, the change was plain to see. Not only in the Shadow Riders, but also in the renovated coffee stand. They were carrying out their repairs with a sense of pride and determination now. Some of the families of the riders were among the tiny group who had arrived to observe. Nearby, Tank's adolescent daughter stood, her expression a blend of astonishment and admiration as she watched her father work. According to what she told Jessica, she had never seen him in such a state. Jessica said that sometimes people only need an opportunity to reveal their true selves. Listening in on this, Jake gazed at his hands, which had become calloused from hard labor instead of fighting. Speaking mostly to himself, he admitted that we had been approaching the situation incorrectly. It's still possible to do it properly, Jessica said. With the setting sun, the inaugural day of community service drew to a close. Even if the coffee station looked better, the Shadow Riders had undergone a transformation. With caution, they gathered their implements. Something more akin to purpose replaced their earlier animosity. Just like tomorrow, Jessica inquired. Jake took stock of his team, then turned his attention back to the tasks they had completed. We will be present, he assured me. A lot of ground needs to be covered. Jessica informed him that this goes beyond resolving previous grievances. It's about creating a new tomorrow. Will you be able to handle that? Jake finally looked her in the eyes without being aggressive or rebellious since this whole thing started. He speculated that perhaps everyone is. Over the following several days, the metamorphosis of morning light coffee persisted, albeit with some difficulties. Jake and Tank were involved in a violent altercation with 3 members of the Iron Fangs, a rival gang, when Jessica arrived on the 4th morning of community service. As a member of the Iron Fangs taunted you, look at you. Wearing orange vests and pretending to be carpenters, the formidable Shadow Riders. You're no longer funny. With his old impulses resurfacing, Tank clenched his fists. However, Jake restrained him by placing a hand on his arm before he could respond. Jake replied in a calm manner that we had work to do. No longer are we involved in this. A guy named Viper, who was the leader of the Iron Fangs, advanced. Since you're occupied with being a community helper, perhaps we could seize your territory. Jessica stepped forward, her aura drawing admirers. Excuse me, gentlemen, is something wrong? With a sneer, Viper warned the judge to stay away. This is for motorcyclists. Jake surprised everyone by interrupting. We do things differently in this town, and it's now community business. Upon seeing the locals congregating, their phones capturing the exchange, the Iron Fang's amusement quickly faded. From their storefronts, David Chen and other business owners observe as Tom Cooper stands nearby, arms crossed. Jessica brought to your attention the fact that there are numerous witnesses, including multiple police officers who are enjoying coffee across the street. Take caution in deciding what to do next. When Viper looked around, she saw that things had changed. Hold on a second, Thompson. You'll come to deeply regret being too lenient. Tank looked across to Jake as the Iron Fangs rode off. We must not allow them to perceive us as feeble, boss. Strength isn't what we thought it was, Jake said, reaching for his tools. Take a look around, we've achieved more respect via peaceful means than through coercion ever before. The day's tasks persisted, but the encounter in the morning had sparked something in the Shadow Riders. Razor approached Jessica with a proposal while they were having lunch. What if we put our talents to good use, he proposed. We are familiar with all of the local gangs and hotspots. Businesses could be better protected if we did not threaten them. Jessica looked at him carefully. Such as protectors of the community rather than tyrants. Very much so. We have the resources, people and connections. Changing our approach is all that's required. The crew was swept up with the notion. As the day progressed, the Shadow Riders began to plan how to revamp their company. Despite their customary emphasis on muscle, even Tank offered some advice regarding youth outreach. He spoke with a hint of hesitation, explaining that his daughter had been pressuring him to make a positive change in his life. It may be this. A new pot of coffee was brought out by Elena as she watched the metamorphosis take place. From being targets to protectors, this stand could be your first success story, she said Jake. Jake put his tools down and thought about it. A lot of ground needs to be covered. In every place we've produced difficulty, not only this one. Jessica then advised you to compensate for it. A company helping a single individual. People from the neighborhood began dropping by later in the day to give words of encouragement and advice. Reformed motorcyclists could serve as mentors to troubled youngsters, according to a local juvenile counselor. Community patrol ideas were discussed by a representative from the business organization. Despite their skepticism, the Shadow Riders soon found themselves entangled in these discussions. Their organizational abilities and familiarity with the area, which they have utilized for intimidation in the past, could prove to be invaluable assets in safeguarding the community. Further unexpected events occurred in the late afternoon. Accompanied by other pals from the nearby high school, Tank's daughter showed up. It was her dad, she yelled. We have a suggestion. In order to run their after-school program, the community center is in need of volunteers. If you're committed to making a change, the Shadow Riders could be able to assist you. With a look of confusion on his face, Tank turned to Jake. Jake slowly nodded. Jake confirmed that they were severe. Let them know that we will be present. Just as the sun was setting, Jessica called a final gathering of all those involved. The coffee stand appeared almost as good as new after the restoration. Yet another object has also been revived. The Shadow Riders' shared goal. Jessica stressed that tomorrow is the last day you are formally required to serve in our community. However, your commitment in the community should not end here. At his crew, Jake cast a glance. After then, they had rebuilt at the coffee stand. No, he stated rigidly. This is only the first step. They haven't finished yet, the Shadow Riders. We have recently begun a brand new endeavor. An additional chapter, Tank remarked, casting a glance at his daughter. Something of which one can justifiably partake. As the motorcyclists put away their equipment for the day, Jessica noticed how seriously they took the coffee stand. Not as a piece of land to rule over, but as something they had a hand in restoring. At first, I thought you were insane, but you noticed something in them that no one else did, Elena whispered to her sister. Everyone I met seemed to be searching for something greater than themselves. No problem, Jessica said. Just punishment isn't always necessary. It's all about changing. Even though the Shadow Riders were getting ready to go, Jake stayed behind. It was Judge Evans who he summoned. Much obliged. Thank you for giving us another opportunity and for demonstrating that our first decision was worthwhile. Tomorrow, when you're not obligated to be here, the true test begins, Jessica reminded him. Then, whatever characters will the Shadow Riders adopt? With a renewed sense of purpose, Jake turned to his squad before returning his gaze to Jessica. Improved, meaningful, something else. Once again, another day of change came to a close, but this time, everyone understood, it was about much more than simply volunteering. Not only did the Shadow Riders start a new chapter, but the entire town was also learning about the power of justice, redemption, and second chances. Unexpectedly, the Shadow Riders' transformation was thrust into action at the first opportunity. The Morning Light coffee shop reopened early the day following the conclusion of their certified community service. When Jessica got there, she saw Jake and a few Shadow Riders already there, but instead of orange vests, they were wearing leather cuts that had a new patch reading, Community Guardian. Jake elaborated that, following the appearance of the Iron Fangs, it became clear that the area might require security measures. The new patches were studied by Jessica. Here because you want to be. And Jake gave a silent agreement. The staff was divided about the modifications. After that, they departed. However, everyone who remained was fully engaged. Nothing out of the ordinary happened this morning until a gang of Iron Wolf motorbikes snarled their way into the parking lot. They showed up this time with 15 motorcycles. While leading them, Viper's visage contorted in disdain. "Observe this," Viper scowled. "Assisting with security duties are the Shadow Riders. I love it." With Tank and Razor at his sides, Jake advanced. However, he maintained a composed demeanor instead of being aggressive. He spoke smoothly, inviting you to come in and place an order for coffee. However, you should be aware that things have changed if your intention is to cause trouble. Something new. Snake chuckled. Indeed, that is clear to us. A coffee stand was the only thing the powerful Shadow Riders could do to guard it. Not diminished. Jake made the proper correction. Very high. Our community is now under our protection. Oh, absolutely. Jessica observed from within the room how the Shadow Riders kept their cool during the exchange. Even the normally irate Tank remained motionless. With his squad following suit, Viper got off his bike. "Oh, Thompson, you've really lost it. Being a true biker is something you need someone to remind you of." Multiple police cruisers drove into the parking lot just as things were about to get heated. The police weren't the only ones, though. Also, many of others from the neighborhood had shown up. People from all walks of life, including citizens, business owners, tanks, daughters, and youth center buddies. Encircling the Shadow Horsemen, they stood in a row. As Jake pointed to the audience, he explained that this is the essence of authenticity, having something valuable to defend. Folks you can stand by. As Viper turned back, he saw that the entire community was encircling him, not only the Shadow Riders and police officers. His mocking smile wavered. "Under your leadership, Thompson, you are erring," he rumbled. "Nothing has ended yet." Jessica stood up and went outside to say, "Actually, it is, since the Iron Fangs have been served with protective orders by every single business in the vicinity. There will be documentation of every incident and reporting of every threat. Either adapt like the Shadow Riders or suffer the repercussions." A shiver ran down the spines of the Iron Fangs. They were anticipating a brawl rather than a show of community solidarity when they arrived. "Now this is your domain," Viper teased Jake. "No," Jake said. "The issue is no longer one of territory. It's all about the tribe. Something to consider before you go bankrupt, like we nearly did." Carrying a tray of cups, Elena came out from behind the coffee station. "The coffee is done," she said with composure. "Feel free to attend our community meeting regarding safety in the neighborhood at no cost to you." Everyone could see how ridiculous it was that what started out as a possible gang clash had morphed into a communal coffee gathering. The tension was relieved when multiple Iron Fangs let out a chuckle. As he turned back to the spectacle before him, Viper glanced at his crew. Neither were the Shadow Riders increasing their aggression. They remained steadfast, with the backing of both police and residents. At this point, Viper's voice betrayed more bewilderment than aggression as he argued that this was not how things worked. Tank surprised everyone with his polite tone when he proposed that maybe things might be done differently. The conventional approach? It leads nowhere. We discovered that. Are you also intelligent enough to figure it out? The leader of the Iron Fangs lingered over the scene, taking it all in. At long last, he refused to budge. "You're completely insane," he said, but he didn't mean it. "Come on, let's go down the road." A round of applause erupted from the crowd as the Iron Fangs howled their departure. The Shadow Riders had successfully navigated their initial challenge without resorting to physical violence. Even more so for the restraint, Jessica told Jake that was remarkable. "Understood," Jake responded with a mischievous grin. "You prove that we are stronger when we stand united rather than when we fight individually." The spontaneous gathering of neighbors evolved into a serious conversation over the security of the area. While still wearing their altered cuts, the Shadow Riders offered advice on where problems might arise and how to fix them. Razor informed the group that they are familiar with all the back alleys and corners where issues arise. We can put that information to good use by avoiding problems rather than making them worse. As she watched her father assist in organizing his neighborhood watch organization, Tank's daughter, who had come during the confrontation, beamed with joy. She explained to Jessica that this is the essence of toughness. Remaining steadfast in your convictions, especially in the face of opposition from former friends. Elena drew Jessica aside as the meeting went on. According to her, she initially felt you were innocent when you proposed rehabilitating them. But you detected an attribute in them that others failed to see. According to Jessica, she noticed individuals who were lost and in need of direction. Their organizational strength was their strong suit. All they had to do was put it to good use. At the conclusion of the day, the reformed Shadow Riders, along with law enforcement and community officials, came up with specific plans for community patrols, youth outreach initiatives, and tactics to protect businesses. As events drew to a close, Jake gave Jessica the silent treatment. I mistook your initial confrontation with us for the efforts of some other authority person to subdue us. We weren't being pushed down by you, though. We were being propelled along by you. While Jessica observed the Shadow Riders assisting with meeting cleanup, she saw how they amiably interacted with people of the neighborhood whom they had previously frightened. People simply need to be led down a different road sometimes, she said. You possessed the inner strength to persevere. In the motorcycle subculture, news of the Shadow Riders' metamorphosis traveled like wildfire. It didn't sit well with everyone. Jake was engaged in a heated argument with former Shadow Riders who had departed the gang due to the changes when Jessica came at morning light coffee, 1 week after the battle with the Iron Fangs. Steve, Hammer Harrison, a former enforcer of the Shadow Riders, accused you of ruining everything that we had worked so hard to build. You lost years of respect when you softened up. As his newfound self-assurance shone through, Jake kept his cool. Hammer, what did we exactly construct? Fear. Fear-mongering. Peruse your surroundings. Now we're creating something substantial. A symbol of transformation, the coffee stand had emerged. Next door, in their former clubhouse, the Shadow Riders were constructing their new community center. One may observe Tank guiding adolescent mechanics through a program via the windows. One of our former members spit out that you had converted our clubhouse into a daycare. No, Jake clarified. It became a future because of us. Those children you criticize are actually gaining knowledge and discovering their path in life. Exactly as we ought to have done all those years ago. From inside, Jessica observed, prepared to step in, but knowing that Jake had to deal with this on his own. Nervously scrubbing the counter, Elena stood at her side. Are the cops going to come get us? Elena spoke softly. Jessica said it was not yet. They can't afford to miss this moment. Hammer advanced toward Jake, his words growing increasingly threatening. Our rival clubs are making fun of us. In the past, the Shadow Riders had significance. Our significance has grown in recent times. Jake said something back. We are no longer merely extracting resources from the community. We're involved. Constructing it. Keeping it safe. Arrival of a group of local business owners for their morning coffee seemed to support his argument. They became friendly with Jake and his gang instead of trying to avoid the motorcyclists. The difference between the old and new ways of doing things was glaring. Hold on a second, Thompson. Hammer was cautious. This won't fly with the established order. Emerging from the community center, Tank spoke up about how the old guard has to change. Otherwise, they risk falling behind. Everyone, including the teen's daughter, had been peering in through the windows as the Tank mentored him. Their mere presence seemed to highlight the magnitude of the transformation. Are you favoring them more than us? Hammer pointed at the locals and made a demand. Rather than your siblings? No. A solid no came from Jake. I am opting for the future rather than dwelling on my distant past. Actual power over terror. Prioritizing family unity over staying scared. Razor finally spoke up after remaining silent up to this point. Do you recall, Hammer, the original purpose of our riding expedition? Individual liberty. A close relationship. We seem to have lost track of that somewhere. Become what we once despised all along. Enforcers of dominance. The word lingered. A few of the ex-members moved awkwardly, as if they were suddenly seeing their past actions in a different light. At long last, Jessica stepped outside, elevating the significance of the occasion. Mr. Harrison, she spoke to Hammer directly. You are presented with an option. The same way that Jake and his team did it. You have the choice to be a part of something positive or negative. You get to decide. Hammer surveyed his surroundings. The refurbished coffee shop. The youth facility was bustling with activity. Everyone was staring at Jake with respect now. He stated, "This isn't what bikers do," but there was more doubt than certainty in his voice. Jake proposed that perhaps we should rethink the role of bikers. As brothers, we're still on the road. These days, all we're doing is fighting for something better. With caution, Marcus, one of the community center's youths, approached. Maybe I'll be a shadow rider someday, Mr. Tank boasted as he explained that he had been instructing him on motorcycle maintenance. Providing I maintain my current level of academic performance. Then Hammer turned his gaze to Tank. Our high schools are now being targeted for recruitment. It's an investment for the future, Tank said. There is more to legacy than terror, as my daughter showed me. With the arrival of more community members, going about their morning routines, the tension started to melt away. The setting was tranquil and fruitful, exactly opposites of the ancient shadow riders. At last, Hammer let out a frustrated sigh. Every one of you has transformed, Thompson. According to Jake, it's for the best. For all of you, the invitation to change alongside us remains. Retreated to their motorcycles, the former members failed to exude the same intimidating energy that had accompanied their entry. Both the shadow riders and the general public's perception of them had changed. As the morning returned to its usual pattern, Jessica went over to see Jake. It must have been quite a challenge. Compared to going backwards, Jake conceded, it was easier. As a result of the shift, we lost a few brothers but gained a true family. Tank was back in the classroom teaching mechanics at the community center. He was gentle and proud as he taught them via the window. As he worked on his assignments, his daughter sat close by, occasionally offering her explanations to the younger children. While delivering coffee to the gathering, Elena made a comment. I thought justice was at the heart of this revolution when you began it, but now I see that there's more to it than that, doesn't there? Jake, with his newfound confidence in his position as community guardian, approached another group of locals, and Jessica watched as he did so. She explained that it's all about redemption and how we can recognize the goodness in people even when they don't see it in themselves. The rising sun illuminated a society that had discovered resilience not in the face of adversity but in the face of shared purpose, bravery in the face of uncertainty, and the power of unity. Morning Light Coffee staged an odd get-together 2 weeks following the altercation with the ex-members. Jake had convened a gathering of regional motorcycling groups on behalf of the Shadow Riders. From her normal vantage point, Jessica observed as different groups of motorcyclists crowded into the newly enlarged seating area. Do you have any doubts? She whispered to Jake and requested. Actually, he did say that, but it still needs doing. Those bygone methods? Dying it is. They are unaware of it at this time. Even individuals who were against the Shadow Riders' metamorphosis appreciated the coffee stand as a neutral zone. Coffee was served slowly by Elena and Sarah to men in leather who had frightened them only a few weeks earlier. As he stood before the assembled motorcyclists, Jake's altered Shadow Riders cut elicited a mix of admiration and disapproval. "I appreciate you coming," he started. "All of you, we have an offer." President of the Desert Hawks Thompson let out a snarl of frustration, expressing his disapproval. "This whole community guardian thing is really getting under your skin. According to Jake, that is precisely the subject we should discuss. Things are shifting. The only way to avoid obsolescence is to adapt." Nearby, at the community center, Tank's mechanics program was underway, as he pointed. They could observe the excited and concentrated faces of youths as they learned to fix motorbikes via the windows. "Observe that," Jake went on to say. "You are not weak for that. Selling out is not what that is. You are creating a lasting legacy by doing it." The commander of the Iron Fangs, Viper, who had earlier challenged them, pushed in closer. "What is the legacy of? Getting along with the police and the public? Honor as a lasting testament." Tank did the same as Jake and spoke up. "Politeness, not dread. For the very first time in her entire life, my daughter feels pride in me. Do you all think that's possible?" The inquiry struck a chord. A number of motorcyclists shifted in their seats with discomfort. Razor rose to his feet and spoke to the assembly. "Here, we are witnessing something extraordinary. We have earned the community's trust. Instead of causing difficulties, we're actually making a positive impact. Where does territory fit in?" An individual yelled out. "Is that all you're giving up?" Jake made a funny face and chuckled. "Thanks to our newfound confidence, we are able to exert more influence than before. Companies seek our assistance. The younger generation looks up to us. It's a powerful force." Jessica watched everyone's expressions. While some motorcyclists gave meaningful nods, others gave furtive scowls. They were all paying attention, though. "Allow me to explain." Jake went on. "A new coalition is being formed. Youth mentoring and community safety were the primary focuses of motorcyclist organizations. Programs are up and running, we have relationships with real companies, and we even have the backing of the police. Is becoming Boy Scout something you're after?" Red screeched. "No." A solid "no" came from Jake. "I wish for us the realization of our eternal potential. Brothers lending a hand to our community, not squandering it like parasites." As his comments resonated, the silence in the room descended. No motorcyclist, no matter how tough, could dispute their veracity. At that point, Jessica stood up to contribute to the conversation. "In this case, the Shadow Rider's actions go beyond mere legal compliance. It's all about discovering meaning. Being fearsome isn't the mark of a true strongman. Achieving their belief is the key." Chelsea, who was carrying documentation from the community center, entered the coffee stand, the daughter of Tank. No longer intimidated by the mob of motorcyclists, she strided fearlessly through their ranks. She informed her father that 20 children had already registered for the youth programs for the following month. Plus, 3 of them are interested in becoming members of the JMC. Everyone noticed Tank's sincere satisfaction in his daughter's report. He was formerly the Shadow Rider's most dreaded enforcer. "This is what we're offering," Jake gestured toward the scene, describing it as an opportunity to contribute to a greater good, to construct rather than demolish. Vigor slowly rose to her feet. "We will not participate in your small change unless you want our help. Because this is the future," was Jake's straightforward response. "Your participation is the sole open question." Biker attendees kept asking questions regarding the initiatives, community involvement, and shifts in relationships between police and the public as the meeting progressed. Although some were still suspicious, others were genuinely intrigued. Jessica later overheard a conversation between 2 younger motorcyclists as the group started to split off. Quietly, one parent mentioned that their children were always inquiring about their motorcycle. That mechanical program might not be so terrible after all. As Jessica watched the bikers depart, Elena drew forward. "Do you really believe that any of them will reform?" Jessica said that some will. That is how change works. It may begin modestly, but it quickly grows. The Shadow Riders proved it can be done. Proof that there is an alternate option is frequently all that is needed by people. Joining them, Jake appeared exhausted yet content. Attempting to alter society as a whole was something he had never anticipated, he confessed. Jessica reminded him that sometimes the most significant shifts begin with seemingly insignificant actions, like a judge offering coffee or a motorcyclist opting to shield rather than threaten. As the last motorbikes sped off, the coffee stand watched the sun go down. However, that day, the biker community went through a change. Only time would reveal the full extent of the transformation that had begun with the planting of that seed. Morning Light Coffee was bustling with unprecedented activity a month after the Motorcycle Coalition Summit. Everyone in the neighborhood could see that the community protection program that the converted Shadow Riders had started had worked. Jake informed Jessica, who was getting ready for her morning shift, that 3 more clubs joined the coalition this week. The Desert Hawks, even Reds, are beginning to see the light. How about the Ferocious Fangs? Jessica inquired, aware that they had exhibited the most opposition. Half of his staff has been inquiring about our youth programs, but the Vipers are still refusing to budge. Regardless of his feelings about it, change is on the horizon. Over time, the coffee shop became a nerve center for the community projects spearheaded by the repentant bikers. Posters on the walls indicated patrol paths and no-go areas. Upcoming activities and success stories were posted on a bulletin board. From behind the counter, Sarah made a call, her nerves calmed down around the motorcyclists. Last night, the tanks blocked yet another break-in. They have ceased after the 3rd one this month. A cacophony of oncoming motorbikes shattered the tranquility of the morning. But now the sound piqued interest rather than anxiety. With an air of apparent uneasiness in his demeanor, Viper arrived alone, his trademark swagger absent. Jake was beckoned to by Thompson. "I think we should have a chat." Before going outdoors, Jake and Jessica exchanged looks. With their conversation calm but intense, the 2 biker leaders found a quiet spot of the parking lot. Elena remained inside and observed. "I never expected to witness such a civil exchange between those 2. Jessica responded, reflecting on the progress the Shadow Riders had made, that sometimes the hardest step is acknowledging you need to change. A few minutes later, Jake and Viper walked inside the coffee shop side by side. Despite his apparent discomfort in this serene environment, the leader of the Iron Fangs exuded unwavering resolve. He spoke to Jessica by name, Judge Evans. "I've been keeping an eye on the situation here. The shifts, the group effort. My men, they're becoming antsy. They witness the Shadow Riders gaining more than simply dread, they see respect." "Jessica," she said, even though she had a sneaking suspicion she was expecting it. "Perhaps the Iron Fangs should also undergo an evolution. According to Jake, you recognized potential in them and initiated this whole ordeal because you thought they were worth saving." Jessica fixed her intense gaze on him. "People could be more than their histories let them believe. What do you see for the future of your club? That is the question." As she took in the metamorphosis, Viper cast her eyes over the coffee station. He noticed a photograph of Tank instructing a group of kids on motorcycle maintenance on the neighborhood bulletin board. He spoke softly of his 14-year-old nephew, who was in trouble last week for stealing. "His mother has requested that I speak with him, but I don't know what to say. Don't follow in your uncle's criminal footsteps. Or, as Jake proposed, you might demonstrate an other approach, similar to what we're doing here." After a morning mechanics class, Tank led a group of teens out of the community center. His daughter Chelsea, who is now a regular instructor in the program, was among them. Chelsea strode confidently up to Mr. Viper. "In case any Iron Fang students are interested in enrolling, we have space in our upcoming mechanics class. Motorbike knowledge should be passed down properly, according to Dad." The expressions on Viper's face were telling. I thought you were instructing elementary school students. For nothing. Aside from instructing, Tank responded. As a mentor, I can show them that being a brother is about more than just making problems. Jessica observed the exchange with a subtle sense of contentment. Not by threats or coercion, but by setting a good example and seizing opportunities, this was the way true change occurred. As Viper spoke carefully, he brought up the Iron Fang's reputation. There was some bad stuff. Just like us, Jake jogged his memory. Impressions might shift. Seize this moment. Companies come to us for security. Children are entrusted to us by their parents. The police department is on our side, not their enemy. Sarah came over bearing coffee for all of them, even Viper. He, too, had looked in astonishment at the cup a few weeks before. Jake had done the same. Jessica assured him that the community is always open to anybody who wished to contribute to its growth. Are you prepared to step into that role? All eyes were immediately drawn to an outside disturbance before Viper had a chance to reply. The parking lot was invaded by a gang of young motorcyclists, the leader of whom was Hammer's son. They were members of the Young Fangs, a new gang that was known for causing trouble. Yeah, Viper mumbled something. Along with them is my nephew. Jacob straightened his back. When that time comes, seize it. Make it clear to him what effective leadership entails. Viper weighed his alternatives as the moment teetered on. At last, he stood tall and composed as he made his way outdoors, avoiding his customary combative posture. He deliberately went up to the young riders instead. To his nephew, Tommy, he yelled out. Gather around here, pals. It's time to head inside. Someone needs to see this. Despite the doubtful expressions on the teens' faces, Viper's voice exuded authority. They got off their horses one by one and trailed behind him inside the coffee shop. Jessica warmly welcomed them to the morning light coffee. In my opinion, Tank is going to begin yet another mechanics class shortly. Is anyone game? What came next was a watershed moment for all motorcyclists, not only the Iron Fangs. Even Viper's mood changed as he saw the joy on his nephew's face as he learned from Tank. Okay, he eventually murmured, looking over at Jake and Jessica. Please explain this to me. Teach me how to elevate the Iron Fangs to a level where they can be truly proud of themselves. An unbelievable scene, unimaginable even a few months ago, came to life as the morning sun poured through the windows. Old enemies mending fences, passing knowledge down to the next generation, creating a positive legacy. According to what Elena told Jessica, there was more at play when you initially confronted the Shadow Riders than just serving justice. Hope, Jessica responded as she observed the metamorphosis in progress. The promise of a better future is perhaps the most potent gift you can give someone. Morning Light Coffee held its inaugural Community Unity event 6 weeks subsequent to Viper's decision to change the Iron Fangs. Booths displaying the several activities launched by the reunited motorcycle organizations had turned the parking lot into a festival area. Elena, as she set up the coffee station, chuckled when you informed her 3 months ago that they would be hosting a family event with bikers. For the life of me, I would have thought you were insane. Displays promoting youth mentoring programs, community patrols, and motorbike safety classes were set up by the Iron Fangs and the Shadow Riders in tandem. 3 separate clubs worth of members were instructing local teenagers at Tank's mechanics workshop. Appearing ever so slightly out of place as keynote speaker, Jake stood by the large stage they had built. Jessica came over with his coffee in her arms. Are you anxious? She inquired. He confessed to being terrified. Public speaking isn't my thing, I'd rather be in a gang fight. She suggested just speaking what's on your mind. That is the initial cause of our current situation. Families who would have crossed the street to avoid the motorcycles were among the hundreds of community members who attended the event. Adolescents congregated around the mechanical demonstration area, while younger attendees raced around donning miniature replicas of the new Community Guardian patches. Unexpectedly, Hammer and his son showed up. He had been a strong critic of the reforms. Tank was showing a class of children how to fix engines, and they stood on the periphery of the audience to observe. I never expected to come across this. As Jessica drew near, Hammer mumbled something about the powerful shadow riders putting on a dreadful carnival. Jessica said there was more to it than that. Take a closer look. The panorama around them conveyed a narrative of metamorphosis. While demonstrating motorbike safety to younger children, Viper's nephew Tommy was on hand to lend a hand. The youth mentorship program that Chelsea, who was instrumental in creating, was a part of was on display at the event. Some of the more seasoned, hardcore bikers were also there, talking to curious members of the community about how they went from being threatened to feeling safe again. As Jessica observed Hammer's youngster make his way toward the mechanical section, she made a note that your son was intrigued. Hammer acknowledged that his affinity for motorcycles has always been strong. I never considered showing him the ropes. Taking the stage, Jake brought the festival to its pinnacle. Peering out at the assembled multitude, his anxiety dissipated. This revitalized community brings together bikers, families, and business owners. We believed we understood strength when Jake started 3 months ago. Anxieties and a desire for dominance were our assumptions. Then we were incorrect. Power at its finest. It's about being united. It's constructing something rather than destroying it. A variety of booths and activities were indicated by his gestures. Peruse your surroundings. Here we have strength. Here we have power. This is not due to coercion, but rather free will. We make the conscious decision to improve ourselves every day. As his remarks reverberated around the audience, Jessica observed. When Jake brought up the subject of legacy, even Hammer appeared moved. For what reasons do we hope our children remember us? Jake inquired. That we were fearsome individuals who frightened others, or that we were trailblazers who changed things. There were more events and demonstrations throughout the afternoon. The chief of police, who had come to show his support for the event, got into a cordial conversation about motorcycle maintenance with Tank and a few other ex-riders. He informed Jessica that this is the true essence of community policing, when people who were once enemies work together to keep the neighborhood safe. Hammer came up to Jake and Jessica just as the sun was setting. There was a noticeable change in his normally stern demeanor. My boy, he whispered with effort. His stated goal is to learn from Tank and become a part of the youth mechanics program. Jake beamed. A parent's signature is required on the permission form before he can start class on Monday. Slowly, Hammer nodded. Perhaps an experienced mechanic could be a good fit for your teaching staff. Mechanic for 30 years. Jake responded, there's always room for more mentors, hinting at his comprehension of the offer's value. Even though the festival was winding down as night fell, its influence was still palpable. Talking to bicyclists about neighborhood safety was a breeze for business owners. Information on youth programs was exchanged between parents. Their defenses were starting to give way against us. While Jessica and Elena observed the cleanup, they saw how well the bikers and community people worked together. Do you know what truly astounds me? Eleanor said, she repeated. Their transformation was so profound that it prompted others to follow suit. How individuals perceive one another. Jessica was in agreement that that was the true change. In deeds, yes, but also in thoughts, yes. With the last stalls taken away, Jake rounded up the motorcyclists for one more statement. Old enemies stood side by side under the long shadows thrown by the setting sun. Their haircuts showcase a variety of club patches, with the new community guardian insignia appearing on each one. He informed them that this is only the start. By working together, we are redefining our identities as bikers and as a community. With the memory of that initial confrontation fresh in her mind, Jessica observed them from the coffee stand. The tiniest actions, like a judge offering coffee or a motorcyclist opting to shield rather than threaten, can sometimes lead to the most significant shifts. It wasn't over yet, but the change was happening and getting better. And it all began when someone recognized the redeemable qualities in those whom society had previously dismissed as hopeless. After Jessica Evans confronted the Shadow Riders at Morning Light Coffee for the first time a year ago, the stand had evolved into the community's beating heart. A unique celebration began with the rising of the Morning Light. The Cyclists Community Youth Center, which was formerly a gang-used warehouse, celebrated its official opening. As was her habit on Wednesdays, Jake was already there when Jessica got there early for her shift. Photographs spanning their whole relationship, from their initial meeting to the present-day celebration, hung on the wall behind him. As Jessica joined him, he commented that it was hard to realize that a year had passed. Even though she knew the answer, she still inquired, showing some doubt. Jake grinned as he waved to a bunch of adolescent apprentices who had just arrived for Tank's morning mechanics class. Fail miserably. Our progress has finally made me proud, and it's been a long time coming. Their progress was evident in the youth center. The Tank's newly accredited vocational training program for mechanics was headquartered. Read in one wing. In another part of the building, ex-riders conducted classes on topics ranging from business acumen to motorcycle safety. A community gathering place was the main hall. Together with Sarah, Elena brought cartons of pastries to the party. According to what Elena said, you can see the lineup outside. There are already half of the neighbors here. Sarah added with a serious expression that it will include some surprises. The usual rumbling of motorbikes suddenly filled the air, as if on cue, but this time it caused joy rather than anxiety. The Desert Hawks, 3 other clubs that were formerly rivals, and Viper led the Iron Fangs as they rumbled in. In addition to their club insignias, the Community Guardian patch was now worn on all of their cuts. Who accompanied them was even more astonishing. With his kid trailing close behind, Hammer rode in style, both of them sporting freshly tailored Shadow Riders cuts. By the time Tank got outside and joined them, he had never expected to see that. Chelsea, his daughter and current youth program coordinator, stood at his side. A strange assortment of cars swiftly occupied the parking lot. Individuals on motorcycles, families, company owners, and civic officials. As she observed formerly incarcerated individuals now serving as program directors in the community, Judge Harrison's formerly severe attitude began to soften. Quietly, she informed Jessica that she was correct. A new strategy is required for justice on occasion. Jake took the stage at the beginning of the ceremony, appearing much more at ease speaking in front of an audience than he had only a few months earlier. His back was to the youth center's sign, which read, Rising Riders Community Center, Building Tomorrow's Leaders. We believed we were powerful a year ago, when Jake started, because we instilled fear in people. Because we assist individuals believe in themselves, we're truly strong today. Changing people's lives is the center's primary mission, not merely altering structures. He then signaled to the assembled multitude. Peruse your surroundings. Collaborating after a long feud. Children receiving guidance from adults who were once the greatest danger to their community. Feeling secure as a family because we shield them from harm rather than instill fear. Viper was there to support his nephew Tommy, who had become a success story in the youth program. In the neighborhood patrol program, Red and his Desert Hawks had become indispensable. Mentoring gave purpose to even the most resolute ex-gang members. With that said, it would not have occurred in the first place. Jake went on. If only someone had recognized our potential rather than our shortcomings. He looked across at Jessica. That morning, Judge Evans did more than just bring us coffee. She gave us an opportunity to make amends. Everything shifted after that. Although Jessica had no intention of speaking, she was prompted to do so by Jake's gesture. She discovered the words when she beheld the assembled faces, the lives that this metamorphosis had affected. I am not here in the capacity of a judge, she started. In my role as a community member, I am present here. Reformed bikers and effective programs are just a small part of what we've seen in the last year. Placing faith in people's ability to grow and evolve is key. Remembering her sister's initial dread of the motorcycles, she glanced at Elena. Now Elena was assisting with the food coordination for the youth program and was mentoring aspiring business owners. The coffee stand evolved into much more than a mere enterprise. It started to represent change. Buildings and programs weren't where the actual transformation took place, though. It all started with the decision to improve upon our performance from the day before. Ribbon cuttings, tours, and festivities followed. As a source of pride, the young apprentices showcased their mechanical abilities. Over coffee, ex-enemies laughed it up. In the presence of their newfound community protectors, children felt comfortable playing. With the sun setting, Jessica was back at the coffee stand, this time joined by Jake, Elena, and Tank. As they pondered their voyage, the sunset adorned the sky with vibrant hues that symbolized hope. "Do you understand my realization? It was great to see your daughter guiding a group of young teens through the program orientation," Tank remarked. "We kept seeking in the wrong places for respect." Elena remarked, while bringing out more coffee, "that you now have something truly to be proud of." Jake peered out at their changed neighborhood and gave a silent nod. "Certainly, everyone does. Not to mention that this is only the start." "When exactly does it start?" Jessica inquired, but she grinned at the thought of his response. "Of demonstrating to other communities that it is feasible," Jake responded. "Programs or structures aren't the only things that are changing. It all comes down to having faith in greater opportunities." The party drew to a close as the sun went set, but the spirit of change lived on. Hope shone from the coffee kiosk, which had transformed from a battlefield. A once fearful community was able to flourish under the banner of solidarity, thanks to the transformation of the bikers from oppressors into defenders. The Wednesday morning shifts that Jessica worked at Morning Light Coffee persisted, but their significance had evolved. Every cup that was offered served as a gentle reminder that there are several forms of justice, and that bravery may sometimes lead to the most profound changes. Far beyond their neighborhood, word had traveled about how a judge's coffee service transformed a community. As a result, other clubs in different cities started contacting us for advice on how to make similar changes. An individual's courageous act could motivate others to follow suit, as the domino effect multiplied. Jessica gazed at the coffee stand, the origin of it all, and the new youth center, the symbol of their destination, as the final visitors departed from the celebration. Along with her, Elena remarked that this would be considered a joyful ending by some. Jessica shot back, "No," as she watched a different bunch of motorcyclists pull up, another club that was keen on making some changes. For the greatest stories, there is no true finish, rather, this is only the beginning. All they do is encourage others to begin.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.